The deed to a farm I'd never heard of was the only thing waiting for me when I aged out, but the barn had been locked for 20 years, and what I found inside made me question everything I thought I knew about who I was. Before we dive in, hit that subscribe button real quick. Tomorrow, I'm sharing a story that's going to absolutely wreck you in the best way possible. I was standing in the administrator's office at Riverside Children's Home on my 18th birthday, watching Mrs. Anderson, slide a single manila envelope across her desk. After 12 years in the system, this was it. No family waiting in the parking lot, no college acceptance letters, no apartment lined up. Just me, a garbage bag full of clothes, and whatever was in that envelope. "This came for you last week," Mrs. Anderson said, not quite meeting my eyes. "From a law office upstate." My hand shook as I opened it. Inside was a letter on expensive letterhead from someone named Patricia Reeves, attorney at law, and a document that made absolutely no sense. It was a property deed for something called Meadowbrook Farm, 140 acres in a place called Willow Creek, about 3 hours north. The deed had my name on it, just my name. "I don't understand," I said, staring at the paper. "I don't know anyone who owns a farm." Mrs. Anderson's expression softened slightly. "According to the letter, it belonged to your mother. She passed away 3 months ago and left specific instructions that the property go to you when you turned 18. The room tilted. My mother? I'd been left at a hospital when I was 6 years old with a note that said my mother couldn't take care of me anymore. No name, no address, nothing. For 12 years, I'd believed she was either dead or had simply decided I wasn't worth the trouble. And now, on the day I was being kicked out of the only home I'd known, I find out she'd been alive all this time, and she'd owned a farm?" The lawyer's letter was brief. "Your mother, Rebecca Stone, passed away on February 14th. As per her will, Meadowbrook Farm and all its assets transferred to you upon your 18th birthday. I've enclosed the deed and keys. The property has been maintained by a caretaker. Please contact my office at your earliest convenience to discuss the details of the estate." There was a small envelope paper clipped to the letter. Inside were 2 keys on a ring. One looked like a regular house key. The other was older, heavier, with an ornate design that seemed out of place. "What am I supposed to do with a farm?" I whispered. Mrs. Anderson shrugged. "That's up to you, Claire. You're an adult now. You can sell it, live there, whatever you want. But you need to be out of this building by 5 o'clock today." So, that was it. 12 years of my life summed up in a manila envelope and a 5 o'clock deadline. I called the lawyer's office from the payphone in the lobby. Patricia Reeves sounded efficient and professional, like this was just another Tuesday for her. "The property has been maintained by a local man named Thomas Wright," she explained. "He's been paid through the estate to keep the grounds from going completely wild, but he doesn't live there. The house is empty. There's no livestock anymore, just the land and buildings." "Did my mother live there?" I asked, my throat tight. There was a pause. "Not for many years, from what I understand. She lived in a care facility for the last decade of her life, but she held on to the farm, paid the taxes and maintenance costs. She left very specific instructions about it, going to you." "Why didn't she ever contact me?" Another pause. "I can't speak to that, Claire. I only handled her estate planning in the last few years, but she left you something besides the farm. A letter? It's at the property, in the farmhouse. She specified that you had to go there yourself to receive it. After we hung up, I stood in the orphanage lobby with my garbage bag and my envelope, trying to decide what to do. I had $347 in my bank account, no car, and nowhere to sleep tonight. The smart thing would probably be to find a shelter, get a job, save up, and figure out the farm situation later. But I couldn't stop thinking about that letter. My mother had written me something. After all these years of silence, she'd left me words. I used almost half my money to take a Greyhound bus to Willow Creek. The town was exactly what you'd imagine. One main street, a diner, a hardware store, and a post office that looked like it hadn't been updated since 1970. I asked the woman at the diner for directions to Meadowbrook Farm, and her eyes widened. "Rebecca's place?" she said. "You family?" "I'm her daughter." The woman's expression shifted to something like pity. "Oh, honey, I'm sorry for your loss. Rebecca was a sweet woman, back before she got sick. The farm's about 5 miles east on Creek Road. Can't miss it. There's a big red barn visible from the road." "What do you mean before she got sick?" The woman hesitated. "She had some kind of mental illness. Started when she was pretty young. She'd have good periods and bad periods. During the bad times, she'd be in the facility. I'm sorry. I thought you knew." I didn't know anything. That was the problem. A kind trucker heading east gave me a lift to the farm. When we pulled up to the driveway, I understood what the woman had meant about the barn. It was massive and red, dominating the landscape. But something was off about it. Every window was boarded up. The doors were secured with heavy chains and multiple padlocks. It looked less like a barn and more like a prison. The farmhouse was in better shape, a 2-story white structure with a wraparound porch. Paint was peeling and the yard was overgrown, but it was standing. I used the regular key to unlock the front door. Inside, everything was dusty but intact. Furniture covered in sheets. Dishes in the cupboards. Photos on the walls. I walked through slowly, trying to find some connection to the woman who'd lived here. The photos showed a young woman with dark hair and my same gray eyes, smiling in various locations around the farm. In some pictures, she was clearly pregnant. In others, there was a little girl with pigtails playing in the yard. Me, I was that little girl. I found the letter in the kitchen, propped against a sugar bowl on the table. My hands trembled as I opened the envelope. "My dearest Claire," it began in shaky handwriting. "If you're reading this, I'm gone, and you're finally old enough to understand. I know you must hate me. I know leaving you at that hospital was unforgivable. But I need you to know that I didn't abandon you because I didn't love you. I abandoned you because I loved you too much to let you stay. I'm sick, Claire. I have been for most of my adult life. Schizophrenia, they call it. Sometimes I'm fine for months, even years. Other times, I lose touch with reality. I hear voices. I see things that aren't there. I become convinced of terrible things that aren't true. When you were 6, I was having an episode. I became convinced that something evil was in the barn, that it was trying to get to you. I started staying up all night, guarding your bedroom door with a kitchen knife. I stopped letting you play outside. I was terrifying you. My neighbor, Sarah, called social services. They wanted to take you away and put me in a facility. I knew if that happened, you'd end up in foster care, bouncing around for years, never feeling safe or loved. So, I made a choice. I took you to the hospital during one of my lucid moments. I left you there with a note, hoping you'd be placed with a good family quickly. Young, healthy children usually are, but I never stopped thinking about you. Never stopped loving you. I got treatment, got stable on medication. But by then, it had been too long. You'd been in the system for years, and I was told it would be traumatic to disrupt your life again. So, I stayed away, and I saved everything I could to give you something when you turned 18. The farm is yours, completely. I paid off the mortgage years ago. There's also $50,000 in a bank account at Willow Creek Community Bank, set aside for you. The account information is in the folder in the kitchen drawer. But Claire, there's something else you need to know. Something I never told anyone. The barn has been locked since before you were born. I've never been inside it. Neither has anyone else, as far as I know. It belonged to my father, your grandfather. He died when I was 19, before my illness really took hold. Right before he died, he made me promise never to open the barn. He made me swear it, made me promise on my mother's grave. He said there were things inside that needed to stay hidden, that if I loved him, I'd keep it locked forever. I kept that promise. For 30 years, I've kept that promise. But you didn't make any promises. The second key is for the barn. I'm giving you the choice I never allowed myself. You can honor my father's wishes and keep it locked, or you can open it and discover whatever truth he wanted hidden. I can't tell you what to do. I can only tell you that I love you, that I'm sorry, and that I hope you can forgive me someday. Your mother, Rebecca. I read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down my face. She'd loved me. She hadn't left me because she didn't care. She'd left me because she was sick and scared and trying to protect me. But what the hell was in that barn? I walked outside and approached the massive structure. Up close, I could see how old the padlocks were, rusted and heavy. The chains looked like they'd been there for decades. The barn had small windows high up, but they were all covered with boards nailed so thoroughly that prying them off would take hours. The heavy key from the ring fit the largest padlock. It turned with resistance, the mechanism grinding after years of disuse. One by one, I unlocked the chains, letting them fall to the ground with metallic crashes that echoed across the empty fields. The barn doors were heavy, and I had to throw my whole weight against them to slide them open. They moved with a groan of protest, revealing darkness inside. The smell hit me first, not decay or rot like I'd feared, but dust and old wood and something else, something chemical like paint or varnish. I pulled out my phone and turned on the flashlight. What I saw made me stop breathing. The entire barn had been converted into an art studio. Not just any studio, but a workspace of massive proportions. There were easels of all sizes, from small tabletop ones to massive floor-standing structures that could hold canvases 8 feet tall. Every wall was lined with storage racks holding hundreds, maybe thousands, of paintings. I walked further inside, my phone light sweeping across the space. There were work tables covered in dried paint, brushes still sitting in jars of cloudy liquid, palettes with fossilized colors. It looked like whoever worked here had just stepped out and never returned. The paintings themselves were stunning. Landscapes of the farm and surrounding countryside, portraits of people I didn't recognize, abstract pieces that seemed to pulse with emotion, even in the dim light. Each one was signed in the corner with the same signature: R. Stone, Rebecca Stone, my mother. No, wait, these paintings were old, really old. The style was different from anything contemporary. And then I noticed the dates: 1968, 1971, 1973. My mother would have been born around 1975. These couldn't be hers. I moved deeper into the barn, finding more paintings stacked carefully against the walls. There were hundreds of them, maybe more than 1,000, all signed R. Stone, all dated from the 1960s and 70s. My grandfather. These were my grandfather's paintings. In the back corner of the barn, I found a small office area. There was a desk covered in papers, filing cabinets, and a corkboard on the wall, absolutely covered in photographs, newspaper clippings, and letters. I started reading. The newspaper clippings told a story. Robert Stone, rising art star, gallery shows in New York and Chicago in the late 1960s. Critical acclaim, sales to major collectors. Then, around 1975, the articles changed. Scandal rocks art world as Robert Stone accused of fraud. Investigation reveals paintings were created by unknown artist. Stone's career destroyed. I pulled down one of the letters pinned to the board. It was from a gallery owner, dated July 1975. Robert, I can't believe you'd deceive us like this. The investigator's report is clear. The signature analysis, the technique examination, everything points to these paintings being created by someone else. Multiple someones, in fact. How many people were actually painting under your name? How long has this fraud been going on? You've destroyed your reputation and ours. Don't contact us again. My hand shook as I read more letters, more accusations, but then I found something else, a journal, leather-bound and worn. The first entry was dated January 5th, 1966. I've made a terrible mistake. It began in neat handwriting. I told everyone the paintings were mine. I let them believe it because I was weak and vain and desperate for recognition. But the truth is, they're Rachel's, my wife's. She's the artist. She's always been the artist. I kept reading, piecing together the story. Robert Stone had been a mediocre painter with big dreams. His wife, Rachel, was extraordinarily talented, but crippled by anxiety and fear of public judgment. She painted in private, creating beautiful work she never showed anyone but her husband. Robert had taken one of her paintings to a gallery, claiming it was his. When it sold immediately, he'd done it again and again. Before long, he had a career built entirely on his wife's work, and he was too deep in the lie to confess. Rachel knew. She had to have known. But according to Robert's journal entries, she never said anything. She just kept painting, letting him take the credit, staying hidden in the background. Then, in 1973, Rachel got pregnant. The journal entries around that time showed Robert's panic. Rachel was getting sick during the pregnancy. She couldn't paint as much. He was running out of new work to show galleries, and people were starting to ask questions about his evolution as an artist. That's when someone got suspicious. An art investigator noticed inconsistencies in technique and style between different paintings, all supposedly by Robert Stone. The investigation unraveled everything. Robert's career ended overnight, but he never told anyone the truth about Rachel. He took all the blame, accepted the label of fraud, let his reputation be destroyed rather than expose his wife. What comes next is something I never saw coming. Stick with me, and make sure you hit that subscribe button. The journal entries after the scandal were heartbreaking. Robert wrote about how Rachel had stopped painting entirely, how the stress of the scandal and his betrayal had broken something in her. She'd given birth to their daughter, my mother, in late 1975, but she was never the same. She died when my mother was 3 years old. The official cause was pneumonia, but Robert's journal suggested it was more than that. She'd given up, retreated so far into herself that she'd simply stopped fighting to live. Robert, consumed with guilt, had locked the barn. He couldn't destroy Rachel's paintings. They were all he had left of her. But he couldn't look at them either. They were proof of his betrayal, his cowardice, his theft of her talent and credit. He'd raised my mother alone in that farmhouse, never remarrying, never opening the barn, and, according to the journal's final entry, dated just days before his death in 1994, he'd made my mother promise never to open it. "I'm dying," he wrote. "Rebecca is 19 now, old enough to handle the farm on her own, but I can't let her see what's in the barn. If she knew the truth about what I did to her mother, how I stole Rachel's work and destroyed both our lives, she'd hate me. I'd rather she remember me as a failed artist than know me as the man who killed her mother's spirit. I've made her promise to keep the barn locked. She doesn't know why, but she's a good girl. She'll keep her word." I sat on the dusty floor of the barn, surrounded by my grandmother's paintings, and cried for all of them, for Rachel, whose brilliance had been stolen and hidden, for Robert, who'd made terrible choices and spent the rest of his life paying for them, for my mother, who'd kept a promise without knowing what it meant. Over the next few days, I explored every inch of the barn. I found Rachel's personal notebooks, filled with sketches and color studies and notes about technique. I found photographs of her, a small woman with dark hair and an intense gaze, always holding a brush or standing near an easel. I also found a box of letters she'd written but never sent. They were addressed to various galleries and critics, letters where she'd tried to work up the courage to reveal herself as the real artist. But each one was unsent, tucked away, her fear winning over her need for recognition. I contacted Patricia Reeves and told her what I'd found. She was silent for a long moment. "This is extraordinary," she finally said. "Do you understand what you're sitting on, Claire? If these paintings are authenticated as the work of the real artist behind the Robert Stone scandal, they could be worth millions. The art world has speculated for years about who actually painted them. This would be one of the biggest discoveries in modern art. History. Millions. The word seemed absurd, but as I researched, I realized she was right. The paintings that had sold under Robert's name in the 1960s were now worth hundreds of thousands each. Collectors had kept them despite the scandal because the work itself was undeniably brilliant. If I could prove these were all by the same artist, by my grandmother Rachel Stone, it would rewrite history. I brought in experts, authentication specialists, art historians, forensic analysts. They spent weeks examining the paintings, comparing techniques, analyzing materials. Every test confirmed what I already knew in my heart. These were all Rachel's work. The story broke in the art world like a bomb. Major newspapers covered it. Art publications devoted entire issues to the revelation. Rachel Stone, the hidden genius behind one of art's greatest scandals, finally revealed. I sold some of the paintings through major auction houses. The first one went for $1.2 million, the second for even more. Collectors who'd owned the original Robert Stone paintings came forward, wanting authentication for their pieces. Each one that was confirmed as Rachel's work increased in value. But I didn't sell them all. I kept maybe 100 of my favorites, the ones that spoke to me, the ones that let me know my grandmother, even though I'd never met her. I used some of the money to restore the farmhouse and barn, turning the barn into a proper gallery space. I opened it to the public 3 days a week, free admission, so people could see Rachel's work the way she'd never gotten to show it herself. I also started painting. I'd never touched a brush before finding that barn, but something about being surrounded by Rachel's work awakened something in me. I wasn't as talented as she was, not even close, but I had some ability, enough to create things that satisfied something deep inside me. I found Rachel's notebooks, the ones where she'd written about her techniques and her fears. In one entry, she'd written, "I paint because I have to, because there's something inside me that demands to be expressed, but I'm so afraid of what people will think. What if they hate it? What if they laugh? What if I'm not as good as I think I am? So I hide. I let Robert take the credit because it's easier than facing my own fear." I understood that fear. I'd spent my whole childhood being invisible, trying not to take up too much space, afraid to want things, because wanting led to disappointment. But Rachel had taught me something, even from beyond the grave. Hiding your gifts, hiding yourself, doesn't protect you. It just means you never get to live fully. I started painting under my own name. I had shows at local galleries, nothing major, but enough to feel proud of. Every time I signed a painting Claire Stone, I thought about my grandmother, about the signature she should have been able to claim. The money from the paintings was more than I could ever spend. I set up a foundation in Rachel's name, giving grants to artists who struggled with anxiety and fear of public judgment. I wanted to help people overcome the barriers that had kept my grandmother hidden. I also hired a genealogist to research our family history. What I discovered was that artistic talent ran deep in our bloodline. Rachel's mother had been a sculptor, though she'd never pursued it professionally. Her grandmother had been a photographer in an era when women photographers were rare. We were a family of artists, all of us hiding our light to some degree. But not anymore. I found my mother's old medical records through Patricia. The schizophrenia had started when she was in her early 20s. The doctors noted that she'd shown artistic talent as a teenager, but had stopped creating art entirely around the time her symptoms began. I wondered if she'd been afraid of inheriting more than just genes from her family. If she'd feared that creativity and madness were somehow linked, that pursuing art would make her sicker. So she'd locked away that part of herself, just like her father had locked away Rachel's paintings. Thomas Wright, the caretaker, became a good friend. He'd known my mother during her lucid periods and spoke about her with genuine affection. She was kind, he told me over coffee one afternoon. When she was well, she was one of the kindest people I've ever known. She used to talk about you all the time, wondered what you were doing, whether you were happy, whether you'd forgiven her. I wish she'd reached out, I said. I would have understood. She was afraid, Thomas said gently. Afraid she'd hurt you again. Afraid her illness would traumatize you more than the separation already had. Sometimes love looks like letting go, even when letting go breaks your heart. I placed one of Rachel's paintings in my mother's old bedroom, a beautiful landscape of the farm at sunset. It felt right, bringing her mother's work into her space, connecting the generations. One day, almost a year after opening the barn, a woman walked into the gallery. She was probably in her 70s, with white hair and sharp blue eyes. She stood in front of one of Rachel's portraits for almost 20 minutes before I approached her. "Did you know the artist?" I asked. She nodded slowly. "I was her college roommate. I knew Rachel before she married Robert. She was the most talented person I've ever met, but she was so scared of everything. Scared of failure, scared of success, scared of judgment. I tried to encourage her to show her work, but she couldn't do it. Do you know why?" The woman sighed. Her father, he was a painter too, a terrible one. He'd show his work and get rejected over and over. He became bitter, angry, told Rachel that the art world was cruel and unforgiving, that they'd destroy anyone with real talent because they were jealous. He filled her head with so much fear that she couldn't overcome it. Another generation, another artist, paralyzed by fear. "I'm sorry," I said. "I'm sorry she never got to see this, the recognition she deserved." The woman smiled sadly. "She sees it now, I think. Wherever she is, she knows." As the gallery became established, I started getting letters from people who'd seen the paintings. Some were from collectors and critics, but others were from regular people who'd been moved by Rachel's work. A teenager who'd been inspired to pursue art despite her parents' disapproval. A woman who'd been battling depression and found hope in the landscapes. A man who said looking at Rachel's portraits made him feel less alone. This was the power my grandmother had hidden away. The power to move people, to connect with them, to make them feel something true. I kept painting. I kept the gallery open. I kept telling Rachel's story to anyone who'd listen. And I never locked the barn again. Thank you so much for listening to this story. If it moved you, please subscribe to this channel. I'd love to hear in the comments whether you've ever discovered family secrets that changed how you saw your history. Have you ever uncovered hidden talents in your family? Share your stories below, and before you go, click on one of the 2 stories on your screen. Each one is about ordinary people discovering extraordinary truths about their lives. See you in the next one.